Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com.
I'm not going to say that nobody asked for these because there are certain things about them that I think some people have been asking for, but at the same time, I don't think that you should go out and buy them right away. Where even though they're limited edition, and I don't often say this on the channel, but if these are of interest to you, you should wait for them to go on sale, because I guarantee you they will be going on sale. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the limited edition, made in Germany, Adidas Copa Pure 2, released to celebrate the brand's 75th anniversary. This is a pair of football boots that promise superior quality, being made in the same factory as where pros would get their custom variations made, with a full leather upper and a unique fold-over tongue held down by an actual magnet. It's being promoted as an ultra-premium, higher quality variant of the current top-end Copa Pure 2 models in both the Elite as well as the 2 Plus, retailing for $230 and $250 respectively, where these, as a limited edition release, will run you a whopping $300, which is the main reason why, despite the limited quantities, these have come nowhere close to selling out. Where, like I said at the beginning of the video, I think people love the fact that it's a full leather modern Copa. I think people love the fact that they're made in Germany, like the iconic and classic Copa Mundial, but the $300 price tag and arguably some of the features and styling of this limited edition release definitely make it a questionable purchase for a lot of people on the market for a pair of leather football boots, where especially at that $300 price tag, these are calfskin leather rather than kangaroo leather, which on its own is a deal breaker for a lot of people. We're going to discuss the good, the bad, and the questionable as it relates to the made in Germany Copa Pure 2, take a look at how they fit and feel on feet, and ultimately conclude whether or not these should be on your radar once they go on sale, because like I said, at full pop, I just don't think these are worth it. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, watch the entire review, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. And as always, if you enjoy the unsugar-coated, brutally honest reviews on this channel, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2024. So first things first, it must be said, the quality, considering the $300 price tag, is very nice, as you'd expect. The whole made in Germany thing is not something that we often see from Adidas anymore. Obviously, the classic Copa Mundial is pretty much your only inline option in terms of getting a pair of Adidas boots made in their country of origin. However, in the case of these boots in particular, when you compare them to the normal non-made in Germany variations of the Copa Pure 2, I wouldn't say that the quality difference is gigantic, but you can definitely tell, especially just looking at the attachment of the upper and the sole plate, how clean it is. It's just very well made. The materials, I wouldn't say feel like a gigantic step up from the normal Copa Pure 2, especially in terms of the quality of the leather. Yes, it's very soft, but is it legitimately that much softer? Maybe a little bit out of the box, but once broken in, I would say it's pretty tough to tell a difference. And overall, there's really nothing in terms of the way that the boots feel that I think feel substantially better than Adidas's other top-end models. As for the boots themselves, the base design is still very similar to that of the normal Copa Pure 2s, particularly the torsion frame sole plate with the FG stud pattern remains identical, and you're still going to get a calfskin leather upper through the forefoot, but also all the way through into the midfoot, basically wrapping all the way around. So unlike all the other variations of the Copa Pure 2, whether it's the Elite or the 2 Plus variation. This is a full leather upper, which I will admit would be my preference if given the choice between the 3 variations that are now technically out there, but does it really feel that different through the midfoot when compared to what I think is a super underrated product in the Copa Pure 2 Plus, retailing for $250? Not necessarily. In other words, the main difference that you're going to find between these and the other Copa Pure 2s is that the upper isn't really fusion skin and that the leather isn't fused to a synthetic or a knit running through the midfoot, which I would argue does make for a slightly more consistent touch overall. It does feel quite good, and I love the way that they actually incorporated the Adidas stripes from a feel perspective. It's got this really soft, almost nubuck type finish to it with the Copa branding kind of ghosted in, which I'm not in love with the look of it, but I do think it feels really nice, and you can definitely tell that there's some additional grip on the surface because of their unique treatment process to the surface of the leather, where they effectively can give it a little bit of a different texture while still being a natural material. And from a leather quality perspective, I know kangaroo leather is the gold standard. It's what you would find on a classic Copa Mundial. And personally, I would have expected them to use kangaroo leather on a football boot like this, especially for $300. I think that would have made the price tag for a lot of people at least a little bit more justified. But like I've said so many times on this channel, the type of leather doesn't matter so much as the quality. And from a softness perspective, these are pretty well as soft as anything. The only time you're really gonna find better leather than this is going to be on a comparably priced made in Japan Mizuno product. These are soft and the touch is amazing, but I still think the kangaroo leather on the made in Japan Mizuno Morelia 2 at $290 is just that little bit softer. Across the top of the foot is where you're going to find what I would argue is the most controversial element of this limited edition football boot, and that is the fold over flap tongue that's held down by a magnet rather than an elastic strap or even Velcro as we would typically see. In the case of the tongue, it is made from actual leather, which is really nice. From a styling perspective, I wouldn't say it really relates back to any classic Copa model. Obviously, the regular Copa Mundial would have much more of a rectangular shape. So if anything, this actually reminds me a lot of the new Copa Gloro 2, which is a $100 football boot rather than a $300 one. Not the best look in my opinion. And unlike those, they don't necessarily give you the option of cutting it off, although I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. Of course, it's the magnet though that's kind of been the big headline of this football boot, and that you can see the minus on the underside of the flap itself, and then the plus on the actual tongue. And as you can see, when they come together, you can hear the magnet sticking. It's definitely a neat idea, and it's obviously one of those elements, unlike Velcro, which could wear out, or unlike an elastic strap where the strap itself could break, this magnet is just going to hold the tongue closed pretty much forever. It could technically weaken in strength, I believe. I'm no magnet expert, but I think the interesting part of this that a lot of people, once they have these boots in person, might be a little bit concerned about is the thickness of the magnet itself. It's hard for me to show you, but there is basically a circular magnet stitched in between these two layers of leather for the tongue itself, and the same thing goes for the tongue on the bottom. So you basically have two small coins that are magnetic connecting at the same point, creating what is a pretty substantial bump across the top of the foot, which of course means you can actually feel two metal circles lined up on top of each other directly on this part of your foot, which is frequently going to make contact with the ball, particularly when you're shooting, which is where I think it's going to be the most noticeable when it comes to juggling and kind of more soft touches on the ball. It's not something that I would say is quite as noticeable, and for how bulky this tongue looks, it actually does a pretty good job of feeling like it's out of the way. But I do think it's one of those elements that, for as cool as it is, I think it's more of a gimmick than anything. And truthfully, Velcro or a strap just would have felt a little bit less bulky, or at the very least, more normal. And then something else that I notice is while the magnet is definitely strong enough to just hold the tongue down on its own, when pressure is applied to the tongue, frequently when dribbling, I found this to be the case, it will actually disconnect and then just kind of pop back into place and reattach itself. But you can actually hear the clicking of the magnet whenever the tongue unattaches and then reattaches itself while you're playing, which again, not really a big deal. I didn't find it affected my touch or performance in any way, but it was kind of an interesting quirk of this boot that again, would only be possible because of this magnetic clasp. Underneath the flap, you're gonna find a traditional U-throat construction with a standalone leather tongue, so very similar in terms of the design to what you're gonna find on the $230 Copa Pure 2 Elite. Granted, it does feel better on this because of the material being leather through the midfoot rather than kind of that slightly stiffer synthetic material. And the lacing system does run nice and deep, so you have great overall adjustability when tying the laces tight. Moving through the rear, it does feature a very different construction than both the regular Pure 2 Elite as well as Pure 2 Plus, and then I found it to be a little bit shallower and slightly more padded through the back. I wouldn't say that the shallowness was necessarily an issue in terms of lockdown, but I didn't find it to be quite as comfortable through the heel as the regular Copa Pure 2 models, which is definitely not what you want considering that these are significantly more expensive. Again, no issues here, but I did feel like it was a step back compared to what they already have on offer for less money. You have an internal plastic heel counter, plenty of padding through the heel liner itself, this really soft microfiber material with a little bit of texturing that I don't think does all that much. Then the insole fully removable, I'll give you guys a quick look at that. It is a fairly standard insole in that you can see it has that nice kind of microfiber soft liner on the surface, and it's made from a single layer of this black foam, just like you'd find with the cheaper variations of the Copa Pure 2. And then as for the base, as mentioned earlier, there is no difference from a regular Copa Pure 2. It's the same torsion frame, sole plate, and stud pattern originally introduced in 2017 on the Adidas Nemesis. It was not a particularly well-loved sole plate back then, so the fact that they're still recycling it on the modern Copa models does seem like a little bit of corner cutting and cost saving in my opinion. I just feel like for as much effort as they put into the design of this modern Copa Pure series, a brand new sole plate to match that definitely would have been nice. With that said, this feels okay underfoot. It's got a more flexible sensation through the forefoot, and these kind of half-bladed, half-conical studs overall do provide more aggressive traction than I think a lot of people would expect, but because of that rounded edge along the outside, you still have that freedom to twist and pivot, which at the end of the day does suit this style of football boot really nicely. And then there's the weight, where I don't think too many people interested in this boot are too concerned about the weight, but it is worth comparing to the $250 2 Plus model just to see if there is any difference given the design changes that have been made. Both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the 2 Plus, which again, super underrated football boot. They weigh in at 8 ounces exactly, the equivalent of 226 grams. Remember those numbers, change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the made in Germany variation, and you can see that they weigh in at 9 ounces exactly, the equivalent of 256 grams, which for those doing the math at home is a weight difference of 30 grams or a full ounce when compared to the non-made in Germany regular Pure 2 Plus, which does feel relatively light on feet, at least lighter than I think a lot of people would expect this type of football boot to feel, whereas the made in Germany variation isn't necessarily heavy, but overall does come across as feeling very average in weight and not necessarily going to blow you away in terms of their lightness on feet. On feet, the boots feel good, really good even, but do they feel so good that I would pick them over other football boots for $300 if I just wanted something made from leather? Probably not. Again, I'm going to harp on the Made in Japan Mizuno product line. The Morelia 2 in particular, I think is just hands down the most comfortable football boot on the market. Do these come relatively close? Sure, and I guess depending on the specific shape of your feet, you could find these more comfortable than the Mizunos, but the heel shaping alone on these is just on the shallow side, and I don't think the fit, while good, is as good as it could have been. And certainly if I'm comparing the overall fit and comfort of these to the $250 Pure 2 Plus, the non-limited variation, I think those are equally as comfortable and arguably through the heel have a little bit of a better fit. The softness of the leather is obviously excellent, especially after some wear time. Like with any leather boots, they don't necessarily need a lot of break-in, but as you wear them in, the leather softens up and then stretches to the shape of your feet. These are no different, so they do a very good job of that, as you'd expect. But from a width perspective, and particularly a volume perspective, they're relatively shallow all the way through. So for somebody with really wide feet, you might find these to not be wide enough and not have enough volume compared to some other leather football boots on the market. So be aware of that. They'll fit most people after some break-in time, but I don't necessarily think they're the best option for somebody with really wide feet. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, I really do like the Made in Germany Copa Pure 2. I think the softness of the leather is great. I love the fact that the entire upper is leather and the boots as a whole fit well and are comfortable on feet, especially after a little bit of break-in time. I could definitely do without the fold-over tongue and the magnet. I think without that element, the boot as a whole would come across as being a lot more streamlined, but at $300, do I think they're worth that kind of money compared to just about every football boot on the market that you could buy with that type of budget? No. No, I don't. At the end of the day, the Made in Germany Copa Pure 2 is, in my opinion, just a good quality leather football boot. But for $300, I would much rather have a Made in Japan Mizuno Morelia 2. I just think that's a superior football boot in terms of fit, feel, leather quality, as well as just overall experience. The refinement of that boot compared to these is night and day. If you just are into the whole idea of the modern Copa Pure 2, I think getting something like the Pure 2 Plus, super underrated, normally retail for $250. Because they're not super popular, you can get them for around $200 or less. I think the vast majority of people would actually prefer those over these. And then if you're just on the market for a great pair of leather boots and you want something with a tongue, Adidas's own Copa Gloro 2 at $100, while not on the same level in terms of overall quality, from a touch and experience standpoint, I don't necessarily think they're all that different. At $200, I think these are pretty good. At $300 though, I think they're a little underwhelming.